Everyone talks about the same must-play games, the big-budget hits, the award winners, the obvious choices. But honestly, some of the best single-player experiences I've ever had were in games nobody was even talking about. Hidden gems, overlooked masterpieces, games that didn't get the hype they deserved, but absolutely deliver when you actually sit down and play them. So if you're tired of replaying the same popular titles, this list might be exactly what you've been looking for. Today, we're diving into 20 underrated single-player games you need to play right now. These aren't just random picks. Every game here offers something special, whether it's a unique story, satisfying gameplay, or just that feeling where you can't stop playing once you start. Some of these might surprise you, and a few might already be sitting in your library, completely ignored. Let's fix that. Let's start with Prey, a game that honestly deserved way more attention than it got. On the surface, it looks like just another sci-fi shooter, but the moment you step into that space station, you realize this is something completely different. The atmosphere alone pulls you in. It's quiet, tense, and there's this constant feeling that something is watching you. And yeah, that feeling is real, because enemies can literally disguise themselves as everyday objects. You walk into a room, see a normal coffee mug, and suddenly you're questioning everything around you. That kind of paranoia never really goes away. What makes Prey stand out is how much freedom it gives you. You're not just following a straight path. You can approach situations however you want. Hack your way through doors, sneak around enemies, or go full aggressive with weapons and abilities. And the more you explore, the more the station starts to feel like a real place instead of just a level. There's environmental storytelling everywhere, small details that slowly build up the bigger picture. It's not perfect. The pacing can feel slow at times, and it doesn't hold your hand at all, which might turn some players off. But if you give it time, it becomes one of those games that really sticks with you. It's smart, immersive, and constantly keeps you thinking. And honestly, once you get into it, it's hard to look at other games the same way again. Next up is Days Gone, and this is one of those games that got judged way too early. At launch, yeah, it had issues, but if you play it now, it's a completely different experience, and honestly, it's one of the most underrated open-world survival games out there. You step into the shoes of Deacon, a drifter just trying to survive in a world that's completely fallen apart, and what really hits is how grounded everything feels. This isn't a flashy hero story. It's slow, personal, and sometimes even a bit lonely in the best way. The first few hours might feel a bit heavy, I'm not gonna lie. The game takes its time building things up, but once it clicks, it really pulls you in. Riding your bike through broken roads, managing fuel, dealing with unpredictable weather, it all adds to that survival vibe. And then you have the hordes. Those massive waves of infected aren't just enemies, they're full-on moments of panic. The first time you see one chasing you, it's pure chaos, and it never really stops being intense. What surprised me the most is the emotional side of the game. Deacon's story, his past, the people he meets. It all grows on you over time. It's not trying to be over-the-top dramatic, but it still hits when it needs to. Sure, it's not perfect. Some missions feel repetitive, and the pacing can dip here and there, but the overall experience? Way better than most people give it credit for. By the time you finish it, it doesn't feel like just another open-world game. It feels like a journey you actually lived through. Then there's Mad Max, a game that kind of flew under the radar but absolutely nails what it sets out to do. If you're into raw, gritty worlds where survival feels brutal and every resource matters, this game just hits different. The desert isn't just empty space. It feels hostile, like the world itself is against you. And from the moment you start building your car, you realize this isn't just about fighting on foot. Your vehicle is basically your lifeline. The car combat is easily the highlight here. Upgrading your ride, adding weapons, improving armor. It all feels meaningful because you actually feel the difference in every encounter. Chasing down enemy convoys, smashing into other vehicles, harpooning enemies off their cars. It's chaotic in the best way possible. And what's cool is how the game constantly pushes you to keep upgrading, because the world doesn't get easier, it gets harsher. On foot, the combat has that heavy, impactful feel. It's simple, but satisfying, especially when you're taking down groups of enemies in these rough, broken environments. And while the story itself is pretty minimal, it fits the tone. It's not trying to be emotional or complex. It's all about survival, desperation, and just pushing forward in a world that's already gone. Yeah, it can get repetitive at times, especially with side activities, but the core gameplay loop is so satisfying that you don't really mind. It's one of those games you jump into, thinking you'll play for an hour, and suddenly you've been in the wasteland for way longer than planned. Now let's talk about The Order 1886, a game that got a lot of criticism when it launched, but honestly, it didn't deserve to be dismissed the way it was. Yeah, it's short, and yeah, it's more focused on story than gameplay, but what it does well, it does really well. The first thing you notice is the presentation. Even today, the visuals still hold up. The atmosphere, the lighting, the detail in every scene. It feels more like you're playing through a cinematic experience than a traditional game. The setting is where it really stands out. A dark, alternate version of Victorian London, mixed with advanced technology and supernatural elements. It's unique, and it pulls you in almost immediately. The characters feel grounded, the dialogue is natural, and there's a certain weight to everything that's happening. It's not loud or over the top, it's controlled, and that actually makes it more engaging. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty straightforward. Cover shooting, some stealth, a few scripted moments, nothing groundbreaking, and that's where most people had issues. They expected more depth, more freedom. But if you go into it knowing it's a more linear, story-driven experience, it actually works. It feels focused instead of limited. The biggest downside is definitely the length. Just when things start getting really interesting, it ends, and that's frustrating because it feels like there was so much more potential here. But even with that, it's still worth experiencing at least once. It's one of those games that feels underappreciated, not because it was perfect, but because people expected something different than what it was trying to be.
Street clear. There are more in the courtyard.
I need to reload.
Next up is GreedFall, and this is one of those games that quietly delivers a classic RPG experience without all the tabla noise. It doesn't have the biggest budget, and you can feel that sometimes, but what it does have is heart, and a surprisingly deep world that pulls you in if you give it a chance. You play as a diplomat arriving on a mysterious island, and right away, it's not just about fighting enemies. It's about choices, alliances, and how you handle different factions that all want something from you. What really stands out here is the role-playing freedom. You're not locked into one playstyle. You can go full combat, mix in magic, use firearms, or even talk your way out of situations, and the game actually rewards you for thinking before acting. Some quests don't even need combat if you approach them smartly, which is something a lot of modern RPGs don't do as well anymore. The world itself has a unique vibe. It feels inspired by a mix of colonial-era exploration and fantasy, and there's this constant tension between different cultures and beliefs. It's not just background noise. It actually shapes the story and your decisions. Your companions also add a lot to the experience. They're not just there to fight. They have their own personalities, opinions, and sometimes even challenge your choices. Of course, it's not perfect. Animations can feel a bit stiff and some areas repeat more than you'd like. But if you can look past that, there's a really solid RPG here that respects your choices and gives you room to play your way. It's the kind of game that doesn't scream for attention, but once you get into it, you realize it probably deserved a lot more. Then we have Kingdoms of Amalur, Re-Reckoning, a game that feels like it came from a time when RPGs were just about having fun. It didn't get the spotlight it deserved back in the day, but if you jump into it now, you'll immediately notice how smooth and satisfying everything feels. The combat is easily one of its strongest points. It's fast, responsive, and almost has this action game energy instead of the usual slow RPG style. Switching between weapons, chaining abilities, and pulling off combos just feels good every single time. What I really like is how flexible the progression system is. You're not locked into one class. You can mix and match abilities however you want, creating your own playstyle instead of following a fixed path. One moment you're using magic, The next you're going in with heavy weapons, and it all blends together naturally. It keeps the gameplay fresh even after hours of playing. The world itself is colorful and full of life, almost like stepping into a fantasy storybook. It's not trying to be dark or overly serious. It leans more into that classic adventure feel. And while the story isn't the most memorable part, the sheer amount of content makes up for it. There's always something to do, whether it's quests, exploration, or just experimenting with different builds. Sure, some quests can feel repetitive, and it doesn't always push boundaries in terms of storytelling, but the core experience? It's just fun, simple, addictive, and easy to get lost in. It's one of those games where you start playing casually, and suddenly, you've spent way more time than you planned. Next up is Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and honestly, this game is a hidden gem that more people should have played. On paper, it's a post-apocalyptic action-adventure inspired by a classic story, but what really makes it shine is the relationship between the two main characters. The game isn't just about fighting robots and platforming, it's about connection, trust, and how two people survive in a world that's falling apart around them. And the writing? Surprisingly strong. You actually care about what happens to them. Gameplay-wise, it's smooth and satisfying. Combat is a mix of melee and strategic use of gadgets, and the platforming sections are challenging enough to keep you engaged without feeling unfair. The pacing is good too. The story and gameplay are balanced, so you never feel like you're stuck just grinding or jumping endlessly. Plus, the environments are gorgeous overgrown cities, crumbling bridges, and nature reclaiming the world really give it this lived-in feel that you don't see often. What struck me most is how emotional it can get. There are moments that catch you off guard, and it's impressive how invested you end up being in these characters in just a few hours. It's not perfect. Some side missions feel a little repetitive, and the camera can be tricky in tight areas. But the narrative, character chemistry, and overall experience make it stand out. Enslaved is proof that a game doesn't need massive hype or flashy marketing to deliver a story and gameplay that stick with you long after you finish it.
Impact in 20 seconds.
Next up is Ryse Son of Rome, a game that often gets written off as just another flashy action title, but there's more here than most people give it credit for. From the very first battle, it hits you with this cinematic intensity marching into combat, shield up, sword in hand, and the scale of the Roman armies around you feels huge. The story is simple, sure, but it's delivered with a lot of weight and dramatic flair, which actually works in a game like this. You feel like you are a soldier in Rome, caught up in something bigger than yourself. Combat is where Ryse shines. The mix of timing-based melee, counters, and executions makes every fight feel deliberate. It's satisfying when you pull off a perfect combo or take down multiple enemies in one fluid motion. And the visuals, especially for a game of its time, are stunning. The arenas, the architecture, the blood and grit on the battlefield. It all adds up to an experience that really immerses you. The game isn't flawless. It can feel a bit linear, and some sections lean heavily on quick-time events, which not everyone enjoys. But if you focus on the core of it, the combat, the atmosphere, and the epic feel of being in ancient Rome, it's surprisingly memorable. It's one of those underrated games that's perfect if you want something intense, visually striking, and a little different from your usual single-player fare. Next on the list is Vampyr, a game that sneaks under the radar but really deserves a spotlight for its unique approach to storytelling and moral choices. You step into the shoes of Dr. Jonathan Reed, a doctor-turned-vampire, and immediately you're faced with this constant tension. Do you feed on the city's residents to gain power, or do you try to hold on to your humanity? That moral struggle isn't just a gimmick. It actually affects the world around you, the people you interact with, and even the ending you get. What makes Vampyr stand out is how alive its world feels. London is moody, rainy, and full of life. And death. Every NPC has their own routine, their own story, and when you make a choice that affects them, you feel the weight of it. Combat mixes vampiric powers with melee weapons, giving you the freedom to approach encounters strategically, whether you want to be stealthy, aggressive, or somewhere in between. The story and atmosphere carry a lot of weight too. There's a sense of loneliness, guilt, and consequence that really pulls you in. Sure, some side quests can feel a bit repetitive, and the dialogue isn't perfect, but the core experience exploring, making tough choices, and living with them is what makes it memorable. Vampyr isn't just another action RPG, it's a slow burn of a game that sticks with you long after you finish it, especially if you enjoy morally complex narratives and dark, immersive worlds. Next up is Binary Domain, a game that doesn't get nearly enough credit for how well it blends story, action, and team dynamics. On the surface, it's a third-person shooter about fighting robots, but it's the human element that really makes it special. You're part of a squad, and the game actually cares about how you interact with your teammates. Your choices, how you communicate during missions, and how well you coordinate can affect how the story unfolds. That kind of relationship system is rare in shooters, and it gives the game a surprisingly emotional depth. Combat is tight and satisfying. Shooting robots feels weighty, and you have a mix of weapons that lets you adapt to different situations. Plus, the cover mechanics and AI make fights feel engaging without being unfair. There's also the steady escalation in enemy types and tactics that keeps you on your toes, so you're never just mindlessly mowing through waves. What really surprised me is how the story hits unexpectedly hard. It asks questions about identity, humanity, and what it means to be alive, and it does it without feeling pretentious. Some missions are a little formulaic, and it's not the longest game, but the combination of smart combat, interesting characters, and a surprisingly thoughtful narrative makes it a hidden gem. If you haven't played Binary Domain yet, it's the kind of shooter that sticks with you because it's about more than just firing guns. It's about the people you fight alongside and the choices you make in the heat of the moment. Next up is Sleeping Dogs, a game that too many people slept on when it came out, but it's an absolute blast if you love open-world action. You step into the shoes of Wei Shen, an undercover cop in Hong Kong, and from the very start, you're thrown into a world that feels alive, bustling streets, neon signs, street vendors, and a city that actually feels like it has its own heartbeat. The setting isn't just a backdrop, it's part of the experience, and exploring it is genuinely fun. What makes Sleeping Dogs shine is the combat. It's like a perfect mix of martial arts, environmental takedowns, and gunplay. You'll be throwing enemies into walls, off balconies, or straight into cars, and it never stops feeling satisfying. Driving is solid too, whether you're chasing down a suspect or just cruising around soaking in the city. And unlike some open-world games, the story actually keeps you engaged. Wei Shen's struggle between loyalty to the police and the triads creates real tension, and there are moments that genuinely caught me off guard. The game has some rough edges. Camera angles can be tricky in tight spaces, and a few side missions feel repetitive, but honestly, the core experience is so good that it barely matters. From start to finish, Sleeping Dogs combines action, story, and atmosphere in a way that still holds up today. It's one of those underrated gems where everything clicks, and by the time you finish it, you'll wonder why more people haven't played it. Next on the list is Spec Ops The Line. And this is one of those games that completely flips your expectations of a shooter. At first glance, it looks like a standard military action game. You know, cover-based shooting, explosions everywhere. But as soon as you start playing, it hits you with something darker. The story is intense, morally complex, and it constantly makes you question your actions. You're not just shooting enemies. The game forces you to confront the consequences of what you do in a war-torn Dubai. The combat itself is solid, smooth, responsive, and tense, but it's the moments between fights that really linger. The environment tells a story, from the crumbling cityscapes to the small details that show the devastation and human cost of the conflict. And the writing. Wow, it's heavy, emotional, and sometimes downright unsettling. This isn't a game that gives you a happy ending or pats you on the back. It challenges you to think about the right choice, and in many cases there isn't one. It's not perfect. Some mechanics feel standard, and the pacing can be slow at times, but everything the game does outside of combat is what makes it unforgettable. Spec Ops The Line isn't just a shooter. It's a commentary on war, morality, and how video games can tell stories that hit harder than movies sometimes. If you haven't experienced it yet, be prepared. It sticks with you long after the credits roll. Next up is Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, a game that's as haunting as it is unforgettable. From the moment you step into Senua's world, you feel the weight of her journey both physically and mentally. The game does something incredibly rare. It puts you inside the mind of a character struggling with psychosis, and it does it in a way that's respectful, immersive, and honestly a little unsettling at times. The voices in your head, the shifting environments, the constant tension, it all keeps you on edge while telling a deeply personal story. The combat is precise and challenging without ever feeling unfair. Senua's sword fights are intimate, almost claustrophobic at times, which adds to the intensity. And the puzzles? They're smartly integrated into the story, never feeling like filler, but instead making you think and feel alongside the character. What really stands out is the atmosphere's stunning visuals, a haunting soundtrack, and environmental storytelling that never stops impressing. It's not a long game, and some might wish for more traditional RPG elements or more varied combat, but the experience is so strong that length barely matters. Hellblade isn't just a game, it's an emotional journey, a masterclass in storytelling, and one of the most unique single-player experiences of recent years. Play it with headphones if you can, it completely changes the experience. Next on the list is A Plague Tale, Innocence, and this is one of those games that sneaks up on you emotionally. On paper, it's a story about two siblings surviving during the Black Death, and yeah, that already sounds heavy, but the game does an incredible job of making you feel every moment. You're not just walking through a dark medieval world, you're constantly aware of danger, whether it's the soldiers hunting you or the swarms of rats that feel alive and terrifying. What really stands out is the bond between Amisha and her little brother Hugo. Their relationship isn't just told through cutscenes, it's part of the gameplay. You protect him, guide him, and sometimes rely on him to solve puzzles. That sense of responsibility makes every encounter feel tense and meaningful. The stealth and environmental mechanics are smart, forcing you to think on your feet instead of just charging in. And the art direction. The towns, the forests, the plague-ravaged environments, they're all hauntingly beautiful. Sure, it's linear and some sections repeat the stealth formula, but the story, atmosphere, and emotional weight more than make up for it. By the time you finish, you don't just remember the puzzles or the combat. You remember the journey and the characters you've grown to care about. A Plague Tale. Innocence isn't just a game. It's an experience you won't forget.
So we can leave now, right?
If they don't find us again.
But you have your sling. You can protect us.
It's not that easy, Hugo.
Oh.
Next up is the Saboteur, a game that's all about style, rebellion, and that satisfying feeling of striking back against overwhelming odds. Set in Nazi-occupied Paris during World War II, you play as Sean Devlin, an Irish race car driver turned resistance fighter, and from the first moment you start exploring the city, it's clear this isn't your typical open-world game. The black and white aesthetic, with splashes of color highlighting freedom and rebellion, gives it a cinematic and almost artistic feel that instantly sets it apart. Gameplay blends parkour, shooting, and stealth in a way that feels surprisingly natural, scaling buildings to sabotage enemy strongholds, sneaking past patrols, and watching districts come back to life as you liberate them. It's oddly satisfying and keeps you motivated to push forward, and the freedom to approach missions however you want, be it sneaky or chaotic, gives you a sense of agency that some modern open-world games forget. The story itself is a bit over the top at times, but that fits the tone perfectly. Sean's humor, his one-liners, and the rebellion narrative all make the world feel alive. There are rough edges, sure graphics aren't perfect by today's standards, and some mechanics can feel clunky, but the overall experience is energetic, unique, and incredibly memorable. The Saboteur isn't just about blowing things up. It's about feeling like a small part of a big, stylish fight for freedom, and that's why it deserves a spot on this list.
The barman's talking to the police. I'll take care of Veronique. You boys, get out of here.
Jules, time to get scarce.
Next on the list is Remember Me, a game that's all about memory, identity, and a fresh take on action combat. Set in a futuristic Neo-Paris, you play as Neelan, a memory hunter who can literally manipulate people's memories. And that's not just a gimmick, it's central to the gameplay and story, making every encounter and choice feel impactful. Walking through the city, with its neon streets, towering skyscrapers, and high-tech dystopian vibe, instantly pulls you in. Combat is fast-paced and fluid, almost like a rhythm game mixed with a beat-em-up. You can chain combos, unlock abilities, and even customize your moves in a way that makes every fight feel personal. But what really sets Remember Me apart is the memory remixing system. Changing people's memories to alter outcomes isn't just a narrative tool, it actually makes you think creatively, and the results can be surprisingly satisfying and even a little unsettling. The story touches on themes of identity, freedom, and personal responsibility, which is rare in action games. It's not perfect. The platforming can feel stiff at times, and some areas drag, but the originality, world building, and combat make it a game worth experiencing. Remember Me is one of those underrated titles that sticks with you because it's bold, different, and doesn't play it safe. Next up is Singularity, a game that somehow got lost in the shuffle, but is an absolute gem if you love time-bending action. The premise is simple, but brilliant. You're stuck on an abandoned island where a secret experiment has gone horribly wrong, and you get a device that can manipulate time itself. At first, it sounds gimmicky, but once you start using it, the gameplay opens up in ways that feel genuinely fresh and creative. You can age or restore objects, stop bullets midair, even bring enemies back to life to solve puzzles or turn the tide in combat. Combat feels satisfying because it's not just about shooting, you have to think about how and when to use the time manipulation powers. The environments are varied and full of detail, from crumbling Soviet labs to eerie, overgrown ruins. And the story? It's surprisingly compelling, with twists and moral questions that keep you engaged from start to finish. You really start caring about the stakes, even as the world around you unravels. It's not perfect. Some mechanics feel a little clunky, and the pacing can dip in a few areas, but the combination of inventive gameplay, intriguing story, and tense atmosphere makes it a hidden treasure. Singularity is one of those games that proves clever design and creativity can outshine a bigger budget any day. Next on the list is Bulletstorm, and if you haven't played it, you're missing out on one of the most fun, over-the-top shooters in recent memory. The game doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's exactly what makes it so enjoyable. You're on this crazy adventure with Grayson Hunt and his ragtag crew, and the focus isn't just on killing enemies, it's on how you kill them. The skill shot system rewards creativity, so instead of just shooting, you're encouraged to kick, fling, or chain attacks in ridiculous ways for maximum points. It's chaotic, hilarious, and surprisingly satisfying. The level design really supports this style of play. Environments are dynamic and encourage experimentation, whether it's using your leash to pull enemies off cliffs, into hazards, or into each other. And the dialogue is full of dark humor, giving the game a personality that sticks with you. Even though the story is more of an excuse for all the mayhem, it works perfectly with the gameplay style. Sure, it's not for everyone. Some players might find the humor a bit juvenile, and the story is lightweight, but the combat is smart, over-the-top, and endlessly replayable. Bulletstorm is one of those games that just makes you smile while you play and keeps you coming back for more ridiculous combos. Next up is The Evil Within 2, and this is a survival horror game that really deserves more recognition than it gets. From the moment you step into Sebastian's nightmare world, you're hit with this constant tension. The environments, the monsters, even the sound design are all designed to keep you on edge. It's not just about jump scares. The game builds a deep sense of dread that stays with you long after a session. What makes it stand out is the balance between exploration, strategy, and combat. Ammo is scarce, enemies are deadly, and you constantly have to think about whether to fight or sneak around. The upgrade system adds a layer of personalization too. You can tailor Sebastian's abilities to your playstyle, making each encounter feel slightly different depending on how you approach it. And the story is surprisingly strong for a horror game, weaving in personal stakes, mystery, and moments of genuine emotional impact. The pacing can be uneven at times, and some of the later encounters get repetitive, but the tension, atmosphere, and sheer creativity in enemy design more than make up for it. The Evil Within 2 isn't just scary, it's an immersive horror experience that rewards patience, observation, and clever thinking. If you're a fan of horror that makes you think and keeps your heart racing, this one is an absolute must-play.
Alright. What the fuck is going... Alright.
Finally, we have Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, and honestly, this is one of the most underrated superhero games out there. It's not just about flashy powers or action set pieces, it's about the team, the humor, and the story. You step into the shoes of Star-Lord, but the real magic comes from how the Guardians interact. Their personalities, the banter, the conflicts, it all feels alive, like you're actually part of this dysfunctional but lovable crew. Combat is fun, dynamic, and keeps you engaged, mixing ranged attacks, team abilities, and powers that let you coordinate with your crew. And the choices you make in dialogue can genuinely affect relationships and how missions play out, giving it a surprising layer of depth. The story balances epic intergalactic stakes with surprisingly personal character moments, and the soundtrack? Absolutely iconic, blasting 80s hits that make every scene feel alive. It's not perfect, some mechanics are a bit simplified, and you might wish for more freedom in exploration, but the storytelling, humor, and team interactions carry the game. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is a reminder that a game can be both hilarious and heartfelt while giving you an engaging single-player experience you won't forget. And that's a wrap. These 20 underrated single-player games prove that some of the best experiences don't always make the headlines. From tense survival horror to action-packed adventures, each one offers something unique and memorable. I want to hear from you. Have you played any of these games, or did I just give you a few new titles to dive into? Drop your thoughts and favorite hidden gems in the comments below. I love discovering games I might have missed. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this list, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a deep dive into the best single-player games out there.